So we're starting with question 8719, and this is on page 4-17. Refer to figures 340 and 450 with a reported temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, flaps at 8, and 5 knots of headwind at a takeoff weight of 82,300 pounds. The V1 MBE is. So immediately we know that we're looking at two figures, that's 340 and 450. I have 340 on the page here, but I don't really know what I need from figure 340 yet. So we need to go and look at the performance chart to figure out what information we have to get from our actual approach plate. So going to look at figure 450, we can go ahead and highlight the information that we know we're going to need. So we can see here down at the bottom, we need ambient temperature, we need an airport pressure altitude, you need wind, runway slope, and that's going to give us this max brake energy. Okay, so we know already from the question, we have an ambient temperature that's been given to us, so we're good here, and we have a wind speed that's been given to us. But we don't have a runway slope, and we don't have pressure altitude, so those are the things that we're going to be looking for in that approach plate. We also want to note the notes up here. And the first one says that the V1MB derived from this chart is set for flaps 8, which we know that we had based on our question. If your question tells you that the flaps are set at 20, now you have to increase whatever answer you find by 1 knot. And KIAS just means knots and indicated airspeed. So then we go to the note number 2, and it says this is derived for a weight of 84,500 pounds. If you're below that, you need to add 3 knots per 2,200 pounds. So we already know, based on the question over here, we're only at a weight of 82,300 pounds. And this note says that the chart is for 84,500. So we already know we're going to need to increase whatever our answer is by 3 extra knots. So I might just make a note of that over here to help myself out. And now, remember, we've already determined we're going to need to find the airport pressure altitude and our slope. And we can get both of those from the approach plate. If you want to make a note on your own page, let me go ahead and clear this. If you want to make a note somewhere in the margins, you might just put found on approach plate. And making these little notes can really help you in your studying because you'll remember where you got that information from. So I know that I need my runway slope and I also need my pressure altitude. So I'm going to come back to figure 340. And we remember from chapter 6, we can get our airport elevation up here in the top in our briefing strip. So we have an airport elevation of 23. So again, I'm just going to make myself a note over here. Airport pressure altitude. 23 feet is pretty low, so we're just going to call that sea level. And then we can also find the slope here. We're using ILS for runway 10. We come down here. If there was a slope, we would see it in the airport diagram. And you can remember from chapter 6, it would say, plus 2% or whatever the case may be. But we don't see anything here, so we know that we actually don't have any slope. So I'm going to make a note of that as well. So no slope. And that's everything that I need from figure 340. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn back to figure 450, and I'm going to focus on that. Now, one thing we need to know about these performance charts is that almost all of them in your book will give you an example. If you look here, these black arrows are your examples. So you can see how you're supposed to move across this chart. And we're going to follow this exact route today just with our information. So we're going to go ahead and start over here, and we're going to follow the same outline of that example. Entering the chart at our temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, we have negatives and then we have positives over here. So we know we're starting out at positive 35 degrees Celsius, so we'll make a mark right there. And then you can see over here, right there, that you take that line from your temperature up to the airport pressure altitude. Well, we know our airport pressure altitude is sea level. So we're going to go ahead and draw a line as straight as humanly possible up to sea level. If you have a ruler or a book or something, that will really help you out here. Now we can see from our example that they dragged their next line over to the reference line, or their next step over to the reference line. So I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to go ahead and make a mark of where this is, and then I'm just going to draw this all the way over to my reference line. Okay. Now, a reference line is essentially a stop sign. I recommend, if you have a highlighter on you, to go ahead and highlight those reference lines so you know where to stop. I'm going to highlight both of them. And you know they're reference lines because they have this little indicator here, ref line. So you can think of those as a stop sign. Now I have to account for something else. So now I'm accounting for the wind. What I like to do, what I think makes it easy, is I am going to draw myself like a self-made reference line, just so that I know where I need to stop my actual line when I'm pulling back. So I have a wind speed of 5 knots of headwind. We can see here, this area here is a tailwind from 0 to -10. That's a tailwind. So we don't need to mess with that for this question. We have 5 knots of headwind. So we're going to draw our line right about there. You don't have to draw this reference line. I just find that it really helps me to know where I'm going to end this next step. So now I'm going to follow this pattern exactly. I'm going to follow this pattern exactly. When I get up to this area right here, you notice that the line kind of slants backwards. I'm going to follow that same guideline. And then again, just following our previous example, if we look down here, they're just drawing straight over to the next reference line. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this over all the way to my reference line right here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and figure out what's my next step. And it says that my next step is applying this slope. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the slope, but I don't have any. It's just 0, so I don't need to do anything at all. I'm just going to draw this line straight across. Now, nothing is ever going to be perfect. I zoom in here. I'm going to say that's about, this is 170, this is 175. So I'm going to say right now that I probably have about 172-ish is what I would say my V1 MBE is. Now, before I look at my answer choices, remember I want to check this note that we noted earlier. Because I don't weigh 84,500 pounds, I weigh a little less, I have to add 3 knots. So I'm going to take 172 plus 3. So without looking at my answers, I would say I have about 175 of a max brake energy. Now we come back over to my answers. You may not get exactly 174, right? We know our right answer. When we look at the book, we know our right answer is 174 knots. But 175 is close enough. You do not have to be completely perfect in these. And you can see even with using an iPad and getting things exact, you may be a little off. So try and apply everything that you can and get whatever answer you think is correct. And then you can look at your answer choices and be like, okay, well, the most logical one is answer choice A. That's the closest one. So you may not always be exactly correct, but you're going to get close. And as long as you understand how to do the charts, you can apply this kind of method to any chart that you see on your exam.